Everybody, welcome back to another live Tape on Tape. I'm Stephen Heiner, and with me, as always, is Molly Sebrier. Hi, Molly.
Hello.
It's been a while since we've done one of these. I am realizing we were going to do one last week. You got ill,
Yes.
and then it has been longer since then. So,
Yes. Well,
I,
we did one more in between, and I'm blanking on what we did it about. Oh, making friends. We did one on making friends with the French, and then I was sick, so we had to postpone this one. And because we're doing them now every other week, I feel like it feels like
right.
months have gone by.
Well, and it's strange because we are talking and we're hanging out as usual, but we're not on for our watchers and listeners. So trying to correct that today, trying to get caught up a little bit.
Yes.
And today is a fun story because this is actually how Molly and I first met, was regarding this subject. And that, if you've seen the description for the video, running multiple Airbnb properties in Paris, how it's done and what we learned. I first met Molly doing interviews for people to clean and meet guests for Airbnbs. And at that point, I had I'm trying to remember, Molly, 3 Airbnbs or only 2. We had Sharon and Rue Saint-Denis. I think
it was 2.
Were you post-Cardinay? You were post-Cardinay, I think.
Yes, maybe there was 2, and then you brought on the 3rd while I was there.
So, do you remember did you do the one in the 17th at Rue Cardinay?
Never.
Okay.
No, never.
So, I think there was the transition was I was stepping that one down and onboarding the one in the 11th, and that's where I needed help with Molly. And Shelby was there at that time too, so she was helping. Anyway, most people are used to the Airbnb experience of today, which is you get told where there's a lockbox, get a key, let yourself in. You'll never meet the owner, maybe never even hear from the owner.
Yeah.
And we were totally opposed to this. And part of that, I think, was what I had thought Airbnb was and what I wanted it to be if I was a guest, which was, I don't know. I come to this country. I don't know anything. I would love for somebody to meet me, make me a cup of coffee, and show me around the neighborhood. And that's what we provided. Mm-hmm. Now, I would say that's the easiest part. The harder part is getting the apartment cleaned and turned over from the previous guest. Mm-hmm. And so how do you write a job description for that? You just tell people, hey, would you like to, very, very glamorous. Would you like to come clean a house, clean an apartment? So Molly and Luis both interviewed, and they both came on at the same time and both did great work. Molly and I went on to get into business together and do other things. But I suppose, Molly, I can throw it to you. What were you doing at that time? How did you find the job? What was I competing against in terms of other job options?
It's so funny because, I mean, obviously I lived in Paris for such a long time, almost 10 years. So I did a lot, have so many memories, and some things I remember clearly, other things I don't really remember as clearly. But I remember that day of the interview so well. I remember exactly where we were in that Starbucks at Sentier. I remember me and Louise were sitting there waiting, and you were maybe like 5 or 10 minutes late, which is like on time for France. And I remember me and Louise being like, oh, I hope we're not getting stood up by this like guy on Craigslist. And I remember maybe messaging you or maybe just making a comment when you got there and you were like, well, this is France. Like, I'm right on time or something like that. So at the time I was a student, I was doing the intensive French program that I was doing in order to get my certain level so that I could then go on and apply for my master's degree. And at the time I was doing English tutoring to trade for my apartment. So I was doing 10 hours a week of English tutoring in order to get my apartment in the 16th. And then on top of that, I was also working as an office manager for a walking tour company in Paris, but that was only on the weekends. I was like the weekend office manager. So I was only on for them for Saturdays and Sundays. I was doing a little bit of babysitting in addition to that, some dog walking, house sitting. I was just it was definitely my like side hustle gig work moment when I was in Paris, just kind of doing whatever I could to have, more pocket money to enjoy my time there, really, because I didn't have to worry about rent. So it was really all about having some spending money to be able to go out and eat, go on day trips, go on longer weekend trips. And so at the time, at least in France, or at least in Paris, like Craigslist wasn't as maybe sketchy as it is these days. So you could go on there and you could find pretty legitimate job offers. And so I remember
And apartments.
and apartments, and language exchanges. Like I used Craigslist quite a bit in those days. And so I was just looking for something else to do. And I remember going on Craigslist, finding it. I think it was more advertised as like Airbnb greeter. That was kind of like the premise of the job. And I saw that it was very flexible hours, the pay was good, and I was like, I can greet people. I was like, I know enough about Paris to like tell them things about Paris, because I remember that was like indicated in the ad as well. Like you're going to actually be like interacting with these people. It's not just going to be a very simple key exchange. And I had been in Paris for 3.5, 4 years at that point. And so I applied and I was chosen. And
Was I part of the original interview process, or was someone else screening you?
No, it was you. It was you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think only Louise and we were the only ones that were at that Starbucks, I believe. I'm not sure if there were other people that contacted you before and you spoke with them.
You're the only ones who made it to the finals. So
yeah.
there
Yeah.
was. And what Molly just described, I think, is still the case for many people who are younger and newer in France, that you pick up whatever you can here and there. And as a student, Molly had access to being able to work legally.
Mhm.
Other people, it's cash payment.
Yeah.
Don't know what happens to that. But the point is, without a regular contracted job, you're forced into this gig economy, which
Mhm.
I'm not complaining. I don't think Molly's complaining, but just indicative of what life was like at that time. And I think is still indicative for people who are young and new in Paris. You're
Yeah,
putting together income.
I think it's got to be like that in all major cities. You know, you hear about people dog walking in New York. You hear about people. I mean, I have friends who live in DC who are, my age in their 30s, and they still do house sitting and dog walking. It's expensive to live in a city, so you kind of have to make it work. And
Sure. And
it's
I
a
appreciate the
very
hustle.
low mental load, sort of job. So you can kind of like collect them in a way without burning yourself out, at least mentally.
Right. So this was a golden age for Airbnb in Paris and around the world. I think Paris is still the most Airbnb city in the world. It has tens of thousands of listings. And I had had some experience with Airbnb in the United States before coming to. I was a very early adopter. I think I did my first Airbnb in 2011, Molly.
Okay.
And so I had good experience with it and hosted a little bit before moving to France. But it didn't occur to me, because I was living in this little studio apartment, that I could Airbnb. I mean, I barely had room for myself. What am I going to? I'm going to Airbnb the floor.
Yeah.
And so what was interesting was the idea took root in my mind that if I got a larger place, then I could bet on having it subsidized by Airbnb.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I bet was on the living room. I thought I could get what in France we call a click clack, which is it makes that sound, but it's less than a futon. So a futon, you could say, is more muscular
Mm.
and usually larger, and it doesn't make a clacking sound. And a click clack is your off-brand Temu, I suppose, futon. And that's literally what French people call it. They call it click clack. And I thought, well, maybe people will rent the click clack because, like me, when I go to a city, I'm not really there. I'm
Mhm.
gone all day and I use it to sleep at night. And my bet was correct. So not only was my place occupied 98% of the time, 99% of the time, probably almost the entire time I lived in the second arrondissement, that more than covered my rent at that address in the second arrondissement. And I moved the place I moved out of, the 17th, Molly. I started renting that, and that brought in double what the rent was.
Okay.
That one had a Eiffel Tower view, if you just peek out of the corner there.
Yeah.
And so that was on the 8th floor, no elevator. People were very happy to get that. My apartment in the second was on the 5th floor, no elevator, beautiful staircase. People were happy to do that. And even at whatever it was, I think both places were anywhere between 60 at the most maybe 65 euros a night. We
Mhm.
were still a deal. But my place in the second was a 15-minute walk from the Louvre.
Mhm.
So it's 65 a night with a kitchen, etc. And as I said, I didn't really have any problems of having to share with the guests because they would be gone before I would wake up sometimes, and they would come back after I was asleep.
Yeah.
So we really didn't run into each other. And sometimes I had food made for me. I distinctly remember coming back to some food made by some Brazilians that were staying there, and wow, thank you, free food. So it was a wonderful chance, and I suppose that's a larger commentary on why Airbnb or why be a couch surfing host in general is the world comes to you.
Mhm.
You don't really have to travel. You get to meet all these people, and so I suppose we can talk about the nitty gritty of it. We're talking about the fun side,
Yeah.
the cleaning. What was it
Oh
like to
my
be
gosh.
a cleaner, Molly?
I'd say like probably 80% of the time it was fine. And it was, you know, I don't mind cleaning. I'm kind of like a clean freak. So I don't, I enjoy it in a way, like going into a place and seeing it's messy and tidying it. Once I got a hang of it, and if the guests didn't totally wreck the place, like it wouldn't take very long because it's really just, changing the sheets, making sure the bathroom and the kitchen are clean, and then cleaning the floors. And honestly, if the guest wasn't disrespectful and really cleaned up after themselves, I could get it done in less than 30 minutes, maybe even just 20 minutes. Um, the hardest part overall was definitely the laundry. Those days were very long, especially in the early days because I feel like in the later days, like you and I would always make a day of it and we'd like get lunch and get coffee and like we'd just be in your cute little neighborhood. But in the early days when there was a lot of turnover and it was like Louise and we were working as much as we wanted to. It was great. But that meant we were going through the linens a lot more quickly. And so for the place in the second with the 5 stories to go up and down, you're lugging these enormous
Bags
bags
of luggage.
full of laundry. And like I'm the type of person, I'm the same now, like with groceries. I want to get it all done in one trip. So I'm like got 3 bags on one arm, 5 bags on another. Like maybe I'm like
One over
bouncing
one over your
like
neck.
between my arms. And the one in the second, the laundromat wasn't like right there. I feel like the other properties, the laundromat was like across the street or maybe just like, I don't know.
No, the one in the second, we had to go down to the end of the street over by the
Yes.
post office.
Yes.
That was a walk.
Which, like, if it's raining, you're kind of miserable doing that. I remember people kind of looking at you like, why do you have all that laundry? And then once you got it all down the stairs and got it all loaded in, then you could I was a student at the time, so I would do homework while I was waiting, or I would just read, or maybe like go on a little walk around the neighborhood. And then, of course, there was the 20% of the time where the guests were disrespectful and they didn't leave the place in any like nothing that I would ever do personally. Like I remember the more memorable time was at Sharon.
I know what
And
you're gonna
yeah,
say with the wine and
yes,
everything, right?
it literally, this is, my husband makes fun of me because he tells me I exaggerate everything. I'm a Marseillaise, but it literally looked like a bottle of red wine, perhaps several bottles of red wine had exploded all over the apartment. Like I remember just walking in and I didn't maybe notice it right away, but I'm walking and I'm like noticing my feet are sticking to the floor. I'm like, what is that? And then I start looking and there's just like splashes of red wine everywhere. I don't know if they broke a bottle and it must have gone everywhere. Maybe they broke several bottles. But I just remember like I'm cleaning and I'm like, wait, there's a spot there too. And there's a spot there too. And there's a spot there too. And they just didn't really make too much of an effort to, clean it up before we had gotten in there.
Yeah, and I do love that you're able to review the guests, so
Yes,
there is a bit of
for
justice
sure.
there,
Oh, I
this person.
remember you told us, like, make sure to tell me if they leave it in like in really bad shape so I can say something to them. I think the red wine incident is the worst incident I can really remember. I mean, there was definitely like times where like maybe the sheets were kind of gross and like you just kind of have to like just do it without thinking of it and like crumple them up in a ball and shove it into the laundry and not think about it. Some people maybe left the bathroom a little gross, like the
Gross.
toilet and stuff. But honestly, other than that, like I said, it was a very easy, very low mental load gig. But I mean, the last thing I'll say is when, and this wasn't always, the fault of the guest, but like if their flight was delayed and you were already having to meet them at like 11 or midnight, and then you get a text like, oh, my flight's delayed, like, or I just landed, and then it's like midnight, and you're like doing the mental math, like, okay, how long is it going to take them to get from the airport to here, and then I'm going to have to go home from here. But most of the time that wasn't ever the fault of the guest. I think we did have a couple times where the guest really kind of messed up and we ended up having to wait for them. But again, that was like the whole idea of your property in particular. Like there wasn't a lockbox. We were there to greet someone face to face. And because it was also like these people were staying in your home with you. So you kind of wanted to have that point of contact, because you're going to be sleeping in the same apartment as these people for however many nights. So you want to know they're, a normal, decent human being and not some weirdo.
Right, for sure. To give you some sense of numbers, between Molly, myself, other hosts, we probably welcomed 500 guests during our time in Paris, which sounds like an awful lot, but Molly's telling you about one incident. I can count on one hand the number of incidents. One in which someone had put the kettle, which was an electric kettle, they had put it on the range top and realized when the plastic started to smoke that this was not. Well, that of course destroys that kettle. They don't tell me anything about it.
Yeah.
So occasionally people would break stuff and then they'd hide it in a cabinet and then we'd find it. So and because we had so many turnovers, we may not find it until later. And the apartments in Paris are small, so there's not a lot to clean. I know it may sound like, wow, we're cleaning all these apartments, but you do a sweep, you do a swift, you wipe down surfaces, you Windex everything, and you put fresh linens. And part of that investment was for us that it made more sense for me to go to IKEA and buy 3 or 4 sets of linens so that we could push laundry out to once a month. Because if you don't have a lot of linens, you have to do laundry a lot more, and that's more stressful for you and can cause problems. But I think at both properties, we ended up having 8 sets of linens, which meant we wouldn't have to do laundry for 8 turnovers, which would be about a month or so. And as I said, Molly and I then made it social. Now one person doesn't have to bring that laundry down. We can meet, we can both lug the laundry down, put the laundry in, go get a meal. So halfway through the meal, one of us gets up, puts them in the dryer. And sometimes people get mad. I remember one time we were all at Alsace-Lorraine. We had our laundromat had 8 dryers, and we had all 8 dryers going. And in Paris, a lot of people actually, they do laundry at home and they come to the laundromat just to dry clothes sometimes. And so they'd come down with a wet load. They'd look, all of the dryers are going, look at me. And I just sort of shrugged. You're just hoping you don't run into someone who has an urgent issue. Because our stuff's not urgent. But in any case, that's another example of just having something routine be fun. And we could have a leisurely French lunch while doing laundry, which was neat. And as I said, the bad experiences are fewer and far between. There are unfortunately bad eggs in every society, in every part of the world, and on every platform. But I think we had a really good time with it. And I think everyone really appreciated that we would meet them and show them the neighborhood. Here's the boulangerie, go down the street for the post office. There's the park. And we put a little chocolate on their pillow and we wrote a little note for them, welcome, and, let us know if you need anything. And I don't think we ever really got called too frequently. Now and then someone would lock themselves out, or the door would need to get opened. But I have a generally positive experience. And more importantly, Molly, my rent was paid, more than paid, provided some nice income to you and Louise and whoever else worked with us later on. Molly did not stay in that job. She ended up promoting herself out of the job and into other things. But it was local. And I think that's where Airbnb can be really positive, is that I'm not removing, when they're staying with me, that's not living space that could be given up to someone else. So I was sharing my space. So I'm adding tourist space without taking away residential space.
Mm-hmm.
And all that money is going locally. So money's being paid to you. That is being spent locally. Money's being paid to my landlord, who is spending it locally.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting money, spending it locally, and someone's getting an authentic experience. And that's an example of a win-win-win-win. And I happen to have landlords that were okay with this.
Right.
And I talked to them, in fact, at the last place where I kept upgrading. So I went from renting out my living room to thinking, well, shoot, I could just get another bedroom.
Yeah.
And then that person would have privacy and I would have privacy. And so I upgraded, got an even more expensive place, and knowing that the rent from experience would then cover that. And at that point, it wasn't making money on the rent, but I was still not paying rent. And when you have your rent paid in Paris, there's a lot of pressure that gets taken off.
Yeah.
But if you know that the rent is covered, then you're free to do other things. And the way that we had the system set up was that the ideal situation was to do the checkout and the check-in right next to each other. So the checkout would be the cleaning and the restocking and whatever else needed to be done. And we would ideally want to do that an hour before the check-in.
Mm-hmm.
But we made it modular that you got paid as much for the check-in as the checkout, even though the check-in could be as short as 15 minutes and the checkout could be as long as an hour. But you could potentially, if everything went well, get paid for 2 hours effectively for an hour and 15-minute job, because you were getting paid for an outcome. You weren't getting paid by the hour.
Right.
And that way people weren't punished. If they found a way to clean faster, they still got paid the same.
Yeah.
And say, oh, well, you're doing it faster now, so I'm going to pay you less. And that's something I've always loved, is the idea of paying people based on outcomes rather than paying them per hour. And that way they're free to do things the way that makes the most sense to them. And I suppose the most disastrous outcome was towards the end of my Airbnb time in Paris before I moved to Molli, which was when a guest came and I think effectively cased my place, found out where the key was. Because we would put the keys, we would tell the tenants, like, put the key in the mailbox when you leave. But the key, the mailbox was such that if you forced your hand in there, you could probably fish out the keys. But we were not in a dangerous building. Well, for whatever reason, the man manages to guess that I am not in town. So I go to Mallorca for a few days. While I'm there, this person goes into my apartment using those keys. And he didn't know that he didn't know could have been someone else in there, but no one was in the apartment. He helps himself to one of my pieces of luggage and throws in, among other things, a Bible and a cigar case that dated from my birth. That was the cigar case that my dad had to give out the cigars for my birth. And it had his name engraved on it. It was a beautiful wooden cigar. Threw that in there. Don't know why he wants a cigar case with someone else's name engraved on it. A Bible, some other things. He leaves my Mac.
Yeah, it was weird the things he chose to took.
And it could have been a she. Could have been a she, right? But left my Mac desktop, worth at least $1,000 in France. He leaves 2 DVD players, which are sitting right next to the luggage. 100 DVDs. I had binders and binders of DVDs. Left all of that. Other valuable things. I don't know why he chose. I don't know why he chose to burgle me. And as far as French administration, for me to make an insurance claim, I have to go down to the police office, fill out a report. And when you do the mental math, you think, I don't want to do this. And this is so often what happens in France is the administration defeats you. And so you decide not to do it. The contrast of that is Dolly, who's written on the website about how she doggedly pursued the French to get money back for them breaking her bike lock, and they reimbursed her for all of that. And so the wheels of justice do grind slowly, and yet they grind. And I just made the choice. I'm not going to go down to the police station and do this whole thing. I'm going to chalk it up as a loss.
Yeah.
And who knows, my insurance could have gone up anyway once I file a claim. That's how it works. So sure, I got burgled. But I've also been pickpocketed in Paris, and I don't want to sugarcoat that at all. It's a less safe city than it was, let's say, 20 years ago in some ways, and safer in others. But that if you told me at the beginning the price you're going to have to pay for, I don't know, 100,000 euros worth of income in Paris is you will eventually get burgled right at the very end. Out of that, okay, I might not have been happy with what items they burgled,
Right.
but I would have taken those precautions. But I thought we had the right precautions in place. And as far as doing it legally in France, just to speak to an issue we talk about all the time, this is not considered working in France. So even if you have a visitor visa, you would be free to do this. The money that you earn goes on a specific, is it line number 21? I don't remember. Ask your accountant. But it is a box for short-term rental income.
Okay.
It's not considered work
I was
because
gonna ask you that, like, anyone
you're not working.
know, like, the specifics, like, the logistics of it all. So it's just the money that you earn from the Airbnb, it's just a line item on your tax return.
It's a line item that you self-report.
Okay.
And I think Airbnb might have been pushed by the city of Paris to also report so they can correlate those numbers.
Okay.
But I did that, and you don't pay income tax on it because it's not work. You
Mhm.
do pay social charges on it. So I was very happy to pay social charges on that income. As I said, I thought it was, and there's another win. So win for my landlord, win for me, win for Molly, win for the laundromat, and win for the city of Paris.
Yeah.
So when it was done right, I think it could have been great. I can't speak to the state of Airbnb now.
Well, wasn't there even, I'm not sure if this was happening when you were actively doing it or after you had decided to stop. Wasn't there a big change in legislation with Airbnb
Yes.
in Paris? Okay.
I was about to get a fourth apartment.
Okay.
So the then man who was in charge of this particular subject in the city of Paris announced like he was gonna crack down.
Hmm.
Now, up to that point, the rules had not been clear. I would say it was the Wild West.
Yeah.
A platform had come up and people were doing it. And France is slow to react to things, especially if they're not immediately threatening. We weren't a menace to society. It was a menace to housing. And I've said to people numerous times, it's one of the few times in my life where I have supported a governmental policy against my own financial interests.
Mm.
And that is my belief that affordable housing is sensible government policy.
Mhm.
And I do not believe in an unlimited right of private property. That if you have 400 housing units in the city of Paris, that because it's your property, you have the right to leave them vacant and
Mhm.
only have them go to holiday rentals.
Mhm.
I do believe that in order to have a coherent city, it cannot be simply tourists. You have to build something. And in order to do that, you can have regulations that, for example, only a certain percentage can be holiday housing, whatever that is. That city can decide. It could be 20%, it could be 30%, whatever it is. And there are many municipalities who voted on and decided that since Airbnb created this issue. So as long as the people in the neighborhood have voted and decided what they want their neighborhood to look like, I'm totally behind that. And if
Yeah.
that means what eventually ended up happening, and I was able to conform with, which is you can rent 365 days a year if you live in the building with the
Okay.
person.
Yes. Right. Okay.
Not live in the building, live in the apartment.
Yeah.
So they're renting a spare room or a couch or something
Mhm.
along those lines, 365 days a year, no problem. If it is a holiday rental, an empty studio like we had at Sharon, you could only rent it 120 days a year.
Okay.
Now, there are some places, some fancy apartments where they make so much money that just those 4 months alone, maybe they just rent it during the summertime.
Mhm.
That's enough. And they're happy with that.
Yeah.
Other people, if they were doing it as how I was planning to do it, 365, then that was a real problem.
Right.
And knowing I was going for French citizenship and I didn't want to get on the wrong side of the law, I was a guest in the country anyway, even if I wasn't going to get citizenship, I didn't want to risk that. So we complied when those came in force. We were in compliance with those, and I just slowly switched off the ones I wasn't living with. Just let the lease run out and turn it back over to the original owner.
Mm-hmm.
Which with Sharon, it was funny because we'd had to replace things on the go. For example, the fridge would break and I didn't have time to tell the owner, oh, the fridge is going to break. And then he's going to go through this whole thing of, well, how much will it cost?
Yeah.
I just had to go out and replace it.
Yeah.
And it was funny because that day I did that at Sharon. It's a very busy street, Rue
Mhm.
de Sharon. I take the old fridge out and leave it on the sidewalk. I go back in to like do something. I come back out, it's gone. I mean, 5 minutes, that thing
Yeah.
was gone. And
Mhm,
just as
mhm.
any other part in the world where people are roving around the neighborhood looking for junk that's out on the street, you leave something out on the street in Paris, it may not be there when you get
Yeah.
back.
I know
And
you have to, like, ask a very specific branch of the garbage company to come and get it. You have to do this whole thing where you write the number on it, put the number on the item, and 9 times out of 10, it's gone before the
it
people
doesn't
even
survive.
get
It
there,
doesn't
yeah.
survive. So you do everything right and you have the garbage out there. I'm forgetting what the
Encombrant,
word is. Yeah, yeah. In English,
encombrant,
it would be
right.
like the oversized trash or something.
Right, yeah.
And it wouldn't make it. It wouldn't make it through the night. You look out the
Mhm.
window, there it still is, and then in the morning, gone, gone. Someone had taken it, and so there's a really nice side business there, and that just shows you there's an opportunity for all these people in the economy find ways to make money. And Airbnb, I'm still saying this is true now, even though I haven't been an Airbnb host for 3 or 4 years now, that it is a viable way for someone on a visitor visa to subsidize their rent
Mhm.
if they don't mind having someone staying with them. And I understand that that's not for everybody. A lot of people are
I
private.
couldn't do it. I
They
personally could not.
they like their own space. Molly
Yeah,
knows me. It doesn't matter.
right.
And just part of that is setting the proper boundaries and letting people know you're there for them, and what sort of behavior will be tolerated and what will not be. And with all the wide world of people and all the people who could have rented, as I say, we really generally were blessed with generally good people, respectful people. And Molly's 80-20 rule is probably right.
Mm.
20% of the time we got less respectful people, or people who were. Do you remember,
Mhm.
Molly, where I was? I don't remember if you were here, but someone was very upset about the sheets.
Oh,
So
because they didn't match or something?
right.
Yeah,
So
yes.
the photos for the listing had some blue and white pinstripe sheets.
Mhm.
And I think the ones that had maybe the ugliest sheets ever, they were just some random sheets, but the very comfortable sheets
They were
actually,
clean and they were always
like
clean,
well worn, but terribly ugly. It
Yes.
happened to be, and she took a picture and says, "What is this?" And I was thinking, those are the sheets that
Yeah.
you'll sleep on in the dark?
Yes, yes.
Are your eyes gonna be offended,
Like, you're
as
gonna
there's
be here for 2 days? Is it really that much
yeah,
of
and
a
I don't think they ended up leaving, but I think I ended up trying to placate them in some way with
Mhm.
something. But generally speaking, we had a really positive experience. And the the few times, Molly knows more than I did, but I also waited up as well. It was
Mhm.
just that I was waiting up in my own home.
Right,
It was
right.
easier for me. I would, sleep. But sometimes I think, Molly, because you would just go up to the apartment and just like rest on the couch or cat nap or something.
Yeah, I mean, because we had, like, our rendezvous point, which was in a cafe nearby. We never ever gave out the specific address, which is another thing that's so Airbnb is just so different now. But we never gave out the specific address of the apartment until we were able to, like, meet the person and see who they said they were. And it was Paris, so there's a cafe every 2 feet, so there was plenty of places to meet these people, and again, a lot of the times, because I was a student and I'm an avid reader, so if I wasn't working on homework, I was reading, but if it got into the wee hours of the night, I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go sit on the couch and wait these people out."
Right.
I'm remembering now, I think this happened, if I'm remembering correctly, didn't maybe it happened more than once, but didn't someone, like, take the keys home with them and had to, like, mail them back?
No, no, they did. They have to mail him back. It was a German mom and her daughter and son.
Mhm.
And I managed to realize that they're at the airport.
Okay,
And
okay.
I said, there is a left luggage place.
Mhm.
If you leave it there under my name, we can go.
Yeah.
And so I think it was 15 euros for them
Mhm.
to leave the keys as luggage. And then one of us went up to go get those keys.
Yeah, yeah.
And then bring them back. And I know people might be thinking, what do you care? So some of these keys are computer coded. You need to present a passport and they cost 100 euros to make.
To be very
So
expensive.
very expensive keys. So happy to let keys go if they were inexpensive, but keys in
Yeah.
France are not necessarily very cheap. So I say overall, very positive experience. Not only did I get my rent paid for, not only was I able to meet this wonderful person who I'm still doing things with many years later, but I think we also made wonderful experiences for a lot of the guests. I hosted at least 2 or 3 legs of honeymoons, including one for my own sister and brother-in-law. So, and to just be there with them in that special time, even though I wasn't on the honeymoon with them, I was able to say, hey, would you like to try this? Have you heard of chartreuse? And I'd pour a drink and we could chat a little bit. So it was a real, I would say, luxury and privilege to have the world come to you. And you got a sense of who was coming to Paris in those years. So it was a lot of Brazilians and a lot of Chinese for that period. This is pre-COVID. And then after COVID, my stays got a lot longer, strangely enough. And I had a lot of French workers who were doing trainings or deployments. And I had guests stay for 2, 3, 4 weeks when they would usually stay for 2, 3, 4 days. And that was its own experience as well. So just that overall really good experience, one that you can do legally as a visitor in France, and one that contributes to the economy while still, I think, having some proper regulation in place. So if you're watching this on replay, or even now, if you're live, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. The ones live, if they're asked before we wrap up, then Molly and I can answer. Otherwise, put them in the comment section. If you haven't had a chance to do so already, remember, hit like, subscribe, share the content with people who you think might appreciate it. Consider if they're complaining to you about making it in Paris and they're tight on money, this is a way that they could do it. And I suppose the main thing I would say is make sure that you run it by your landlord.
Right.
You get into a lot of trouble if you don't, and just let them know, I will take responsibility. I'll sign whatever you need me to sign. And that's what happened with my last landlord specifically. And even the addendum, which is not, I would say, specifically legal, because it was an English addendum to a French lease, but we both were English speakers. Right. And we wrote in there, this is specifically what it's doing. I assume liability. I have the insurance for it. And she was getting paid every month. Exactly. That's what she cared about. She didn't care if I was willing to live with strangers. For a period of time. And I suppose that's the other thing is, even if a guest were intolerable for some reason or another, they're gone in a few days.
Yeah, there was definitely a few that you were like, oh, I can't wait for these people to leave. But that's what you agree to, and that's what you sign up for when you do this sort of thing. And it's interesting. Steven and I were just in New York together for a couple of days, and my husband and I stayed in a hotel that we found on Airbnb. And it was so interesting, even looking for a place to stay. I'm not opposed to staying in a hotel, but I was like, well, it'd be fun to find like a cute Airbnb in Brooklyn or whatever. And the Airbnbs in New York are very few and far between. It's
because of legislation that got passed.
Okay, because it was either hotels or it was either a room in someone's home. It was very, very rare. The only ones I saw that was like renting out the full apartment was actually in New Jersey. So the legislation must not be.
Yeah, there was an Airbnb apocalypse, I think, like a year or 2 ago. Okay. Which would wipe that all out. The Airbnb I like to stay at is in Queens. Really nice lady. She's got a room on the 2nd floor. Very nice. I feel like she's got 2 or 3 rooms available, because I saw people in the living room as I had a lot of errands to do. So normally I would socialize. But this time I ended up staying, I didn't find it on Airbnb, I used Expedia, but in a capsule hotel. So lots of us in one space, but blocked off with doors. But yeah, Airbnb, when you can find it, is a wonderful experience. And yes, the platform has problems. I'm not here to defend Airbnb today. I'm simply here to say it really worked well for Molly and me. It was the beginning of a beautiful friendship and collaboration and business partnership. And I suppose that's another lesson, is you never know.
I know
when you're going to meet a best friend.
I know.
It's a great thing. So grateful to Airbnb for many things. And as I said, as we've noted, opportunity to make your life in France a little easier financially. This could be one of the ways, if you get approval from your landlord, and if you're the sort of person who can tolerate strangers in your space. Yes. With a reminder, they're mostly gone.
Mhm.
People do not fly from around the world to come to Paris to sit in your apartment all
Right.
day.
Right.
They're gone. You're probably gone. It's okay. All right. Well, I don't know. Did we determine what our next subject is?
No, no.
So if you have ideas, Molly and I are always open to taking them. Leave those in the comments. Otherwise, we'll probably do a book club or a film club. We always like doing those. And Molly's got a French husband now to watch these French films with. So
Yes.
we'll have dual perspectives on every episode. And at some point, we probably need to get Pierre in on one of these lives and get
I know.
his perspective. Force him to speak a bit of English.
Well, I was just going to say, you could force them to speak English, or we could force our viewers to practice their French.
Ooh, very nice. I like that idea. We could do both. Like you have the insert subtitles here. All right. Well, thank you everybody for taking time to stop by our live. We will see you next time. And as I said, please put comments for what you'd like to see us cover. Until that time, à bientôt.
À bientôt.